I was enraged. I was a mess. I just can't describe what goes through your mind. You want to pop somebody. She's dead, but why?
I just remember my heart beating very loudly, and he said, somebody murdered our baby. My friend told me, you kept screaming and screaming and screaming, murdered, murdered. Everything just went blank, and I was like a zombie.
At night, trying to solve this case, we were very concerned about the possibility that we had a killer that was out there just randomly shooting people. I want to get the shooter, the person who pulled the trigger that ended the lives of these two young girls. That's who I want.
This is the outfit my sister was killed in. I was such a little whole kid, just 27 years. And I dream about it, and I have nightmares about it. Like it happened yesterday. It was horrible. You see this on TV. You don't see this in a little town of Bethlehem. This is our... And the joke was always that we were so poor that my dad used to use a bowl to cut our hair. So we all used to have the same haircut except for Jen. Jen always had ponytails, but the rest of us, unfortunately, had bowl haircuts. Just makes me sad. We did everything together. Till the day she died, everybody was still friends. And still together. We're all still together except for her. On the night of June 29th, my boyfriend and I were sleeping when the men came through the door with the flashlight and gun pointed at us. My daughter's crib was right there. They turned into the room. The gun was pointing at the crib. At which point I panicked. I was like, what's going on? Like, what are you doing? I remember saying that. What are you doing? Why do you have that near my daughter? Out of bed. We want everybody downstairs right now. Like, holy heck, who's running through my house? You know, what is this? Nobody was allowed to talk. They made my whole entire family meet in the living room. And they had my dad at gunpoint. It was like a scene out of a horror movie. Like, you see the... And we lived it. I didn't know if it was a robbery. No clues. They did identify themselves as Bethlehem police officers, but when you're awoken like that, till you start understanding everything that was going on, you didn't know too much. There was, I think, 3 detectives were there. Many uniformed cops were there. And just told us something had happened, and Jen was involved, and they needed to gather information. So we sat in the living room for a long time, just asking questions like, you know, who were you with tonight? You know, what car did you drive? My mother was at work. The only one who was missing that night was my sister. It was horrible.
June 29th, well, it was a regular day for me. I got up and I went to work. I worked at the Bethlehem Steel, and then I had a part-time job tending bar. When I got home after bartending, it was late at night. I didn't see my wife's car, so I figured she went to work. I was assuming that all my children were home when I got home. I wound up falling asleep on the sofa. I was woken up with a 45 at my head. There was 3 cops with their guns drawn, pointed at me. Got up to the kids. They all came down. My wife's not there, or my daughter Jennifer, and I said, there's something going on. What's going on? He says, well, my wife's supposed to be working. I don't know where my daughter's at, because I got home late. I'm assuming she was in bed. It's a weird feeling. You're frantic. We asked where Jennifer, she was killed up at the lookout, but they didn't say how or why. I was very confused. There was a panic in all of us. We were kind of like dumbstruck, really.
June 29th, 1995, I remember that my wife and I were sleeping, and my phone had a homicide up at the Lehigh Lookout. The Lookout is a very scenic area that overlooks the city of Bethlehem. It can be a draw for young people, teenagers, to just sort of hang out. It's secluded. When I pulled into the Lookout, the police were already starting processing of the crime scene. He was able to tell me that there were two victims. The first was a young girl who was laying face down on the other side of the wall where you might sit to look out over the city of Bethlehem. She had a gunshot wound in the back. There were some fast food stuff on the wall which suggested that she probably was sitting there at the time she was shot. It wasn't very far where the sports car was parked. In the back seat was another body of a young girl. The theory was, based on the blood droppings and also where the gun casings were left, that it appears she probably ran from the initial point bleeding and then probably tried to get in the car to get away, perhaps, or to protect herself, lock the doors, and then probably died in there because of gun. This is a photograph of Mary and Jennifer. I haven't seen this photograph for a long time, and I remember looking at the autopsies of these two girls. I mean, they were just so young, you know, and seeing them on a slab with bullet wounds. It's really tough to take. I don't think that there was any working theory at that time, but when I see people shot in the back, essentially, that showed us that there was only one firearm for both victims, which suggests one shooter. Homicides are personal. They usually have some kind of motive. And we were concerned that here we were in an isolated area with two girls who were young, 17 and 15. And we're thinking, is there somebody in these forests, in the area, you know, with a rifle, with a gun? We really did not know, and we were very concerned that was out there just randomly shooting people.
This was Christmas a few years ago. With my husband Carl, myself, and my 4 children. 95. Things were pretty good. Everybody was healthy and happy. I worked with children with disabilities. I'd spend the night with them, get them up in the morning, dress them, give them breakfast, and make sure they got off to school. I heard a knock at the door. I was thinking, who's knocking at the door at 5:30 in the morning? I just remember my heart beating very loudly. And I went to answer the door, and when I opened it, my husband and my co-worker were standing there. I could see they had been crying. I don't know why. I said, just don't tell me something happened to my Jennifer. Concerned if it was Melanie or my boys. They kept shaking their heads. They wouldn't say. I thought maybe a car accident. And I said, all right, Carl, let me get my purse and we'll go to the hospital. And Carl just looked me right in the eye and he said, no. He said, somebody murdered our daughter. No, somebody murdered our baby. She said, you could have heard you in the next county. You kept screaming and screaming and screaming, murdered, murdered. We went to police headquarters and we walked in there. You could have heard a pin drop. There must have been 5 or 6 officers. What happened? What happened? Nobody would answer us. We were fingerprinted. They told us to sit down. Still, I didn't know what happened. Carl didn't know what happened. It was a very hectic day. I didn't see Jennifer except when she came home from work. And we both... Well, there was no supper that day, so this is why I said to her, I'm just going to have to give you some money, and you'll have to pick up some fast food or something to eat tonight. And I said, you may use my car. Right away, her face lit up. We were just getting into the car to go. When Jennifer looked out, and she said, Mary, she said, do you want to agree with our neighbor? She goes across the street. Jennifer's like, come on, I have my mom's car. And that's how she ended up going in the car. They drove me to work, and they dropped me off. Jen came in the house with me. I said, I'm going to give you $10, get something to eat. And I gave her all the rules and regulations about the car, the curfew. She said, I want to tell you I love you. I love you, Mommy. I said, I love you too, but Jennifer, I'm not giving you any more money. And go. I have to go back to work. And that's the last time I saw her. Within an hour, the incident happened and they were dead. I was sitting there waiting. She was in a car accident. They're young, they're girls. Were they raped? And an officer came out. He knew us. He said, I know these people. They're my neighbors. He said, those were good girls. These are good people. I'm going to tell you what happened to the girls. He said they were both shot and killed. Everything just, it never crossed my mind that they were shot. They didn't elaborate on much. They told us we could go home and they would get in touch with us.
After we left the police station, we still didn't really know what happened. You call the police station every day, and you get basically the same answer. We keep ending. I read the newspaper. It told us that there was a murder-suicide, and they were saying Jennifer shot Mary and then killed herself. And it really upset me, knowing my daughter. No, that ain't her, and it really pissed me off, per se, that they wrote something like that. I was enraged. I'll describe what goes through your mind. To me, the news media sucks because they were trying to pick the worst out of my daughter. No matter where you went, the media, they were there, the people knocking at your doors. You can hear so much about your daughter, and then finally it gets to the point where you want to pop somebody. This is when I finally went out to greet all the reporters that were standing around the house, looking for answers. They said Jennifer owed a lot of money to people for drugs, and really, that upset me. They even come up with she owed somebody $500 or something. And I said, no, I don't believe so. And I showed her that she had more money in her bank account than I did. So I knew it wasn't drugs. She's dead, but why? They wanted to know. And I said, we don't know. I said, that was it. I couldn't do no more. And I went back inside.
Was it somebody didn't like her? Was it meant for me? You know, I asked myself that in the beginning many times because we look so much alike. Was it meant for me? The cops made me to believe that I should just be extra careful because they didn't know. They didn't know if they were coming after the family. I was followed outside of our house. They followed me to work. I looked over my shoulder. The cops questioned my friends. They questioned my neighbors. They questioned everybody. You started blaming your family members. You started blaming cousins. You started blaming your friends. My mom started blaming my dad. My dad would blame my mom. I didn't know if my mom did it. It was horrible. You see this on TV. You don't see this in a little town of Bethlehem.
There were lots of rumors going around that this was a killing because one of the girls owed drug money. We never really established any of that. They were pretty much average high school kids. We did a lot of background work on both of them. Were involved in anything other than normal teenage activities. These are two young kids, 15, 17 years old, minding their own business, sitting on a wall, enjoying a summer evening, eating French fries and drinking a soda. And someone shoots these girls from behind, and no one can say why. We really did not know, and we were very concerned that was out there just randomly shooting people. We have a serial killer, we have random shootings. There was a lot of fear in the area. My office got flooded with phone calls, so did Bethel Police. We normally try to put the community at ease by saying, there's no need to fear, but in this case, we couldn't say that.
Burying my sister. My mom just wasn't up to it. She wasn't up to picking out her outfit. She just wasn't up to... She went away on us. Mentally, she was gone. So I remember picking out her outfit. My sister was like a tomboy. And, you know, everybody normally, oh, you bury him in a dress. You bury him like that. And I'm not going to bury my sister in something. She'd probably come back and haunt me if I buried her in a dress. I dressed her in her favorite outfit that she wore quite often. She had on her favorite pair of jeans and her vest that she wore. And we did her hair the way she always had it done. It sucked. I wanted to pick out her graduation outfit. I didn't want to pick out an outfit she was going to be buried in.
The grief, it took over me. I was more worried about myself, grieving, and not worrying about my children, and just staying there for a while. And where I go up to Jennifer's room and sit there and ask her why. No parent should have to bury their child at all. We checked in with the police every day for a couple of weeks to find out what's going on. Every day we got the same answer. They still haven't found a killer yet. And then just a waiting game.
I couldn't get any peace. I had no peace of mind. I just wanted to know who did this. I did get the courage to go up to where it happened. I kept visualizing what happened. There was a little car there, and two young men were there. And I said, did you know the girls? And they said, yes, they did. And I didn't recognize them. I didn't know them. I said, I was Jennifer's mother. I said, it's terrible what happened here. And then they got in the car and left. I didn't know who they were at the time. I just thought they were just passerbys.
Is it possible the girls knew their killer? I thought so. The reason why I thought so is because generally, I go with statistics. Most time people do know. It's very rare that you have random circle of friendships of these girls. It was someone that they knew. That's what we thought. The very first starting point is family and friends. We started to trace the friendships of these girls. It took a lot of interviews. It was not easy, and it took the police months. You're looking at. And he was one of the first people that we interviewed. He was not overly helpful. Not that he was necessarily lying, although we believe that there may have been some of that going on too. Very early in the investigation, he got in contact with a public defender who basically stonewalled the police in terms of trying to give any information. He sort of made himself look more guilty by doing that. But at that point, we had no evidence that he did anything wrong. It was just weird that he would, go to a public defender at that point. He wasn't charged with anything. He wasn't really being accused of anything. His name surfaced early as someone that was in connection between him and these two girls. So we came back to him again. He was 18, bouncing around pretty much on his own, staying at friends' houses, not working, didn't have a great relationship with his family. I called him sort of a drifter. He had had some crimes of theft and things of that nature in his background as a juvenile. So, we didn't really have a lot of information about him in. He denied being at the lookout, never was up that area, gave some alibi that he was with two other young boys. We didn't have anything on him. We had to sort of put him off to the side and continue with the investigation. When you have an unsolved homicide, like there's no obvious evidence of motive in an area such as this lookout, which is a secluded area, it puts a lot of pressure on the police and the prosecutor to try to solve it. We were working day and night to try to solve this case. It was a top priority. We have team meetings just about every single day. I would be down either in the morning, sometimes in the morning and the afternoon, for updates. Who would you talk to? What do you think? Where's it leading to for the summer? In early December of 1995, police investigators tell me that Mary's boyfriend wanted to reach out, that he had some additional information to share with the police. That the victims were going to go meet Christopher Bissey that evening. This is important information because it puts Bissey, who's now a suspect that we're looking at, in the presence of the victims.
Outfit my sister was killed in. Somebody asked me the other day why my daughter, Mommy, why are you holding on to that? I don't know. And I look at it, and how such a little hole can just destroy somebody and kill them. 27 years. And I dream about it, and I have nightmares about it. Like it happened yesterday.
No one seemed to know who he was in relationship with Jennifer Grider and Mary Orlando. He was not a friend of theirs. It's not clear how the girls knew Bissey, but it's the only evidence we have. So we brought in a number of his other friends, so-called friends, who said, when the news hit about the girls, Bissey was bragging like I was up there. I was the one who did it. The friends dismissed it as just bravado, and he was acting cool and acting tough, and they hadn't come forward right away. They're young kids, afraid for whatever reasons. They're going to get in trouble themselves, hanging around with the wrong crowd. One of them was the driver of the vehicle that Bissy was in, driving around with that evening. I think he was 18 at the time. And then we had another young boy who was a passenger. One of them, he had parents that I recall encouraged him to tell the truth. We interviewed the driver and passenger separately, and they gave almost identical statements as to what happened. The driver tells us that he's with himself, passenger, Chris Bissy, driving around at 9:30. Allegedly, Bissy tells him, I want to go up to that lookout. He pulls in, he opens his window, he's looking around, and all of a sudden, he hears gunshots. He sees Bissy with his arm out the rear passenger side window, shooting at a girl that was sitting on the wall, and then he expressed as being in shock, basically, that out of the vehicle and walks towards the girl who's fleeing and shoots some more. He gets back in and tells the driver, let's go, we gotta go. According to the driver and the passenger, they then drive around a little bit more, and that they don't even discuss what happened. There's like silence about this, which is incredible. And then the driver goes home, and basically, as he puts it, tries to put this out of his mind. When they described how the shooting occurred, it matched where we found the casings, where the victims were. So they had to be there, because no one else would know what it looked like except people who were there that night. I could have charged all three with murder, but mere presence at the scene is not sufficient to make you guilty of a crime. Without them, I would have no case against the actual shooter. And the passenger, they didn't have the gun in their hand. I want to get the shooter, the person who pulled the trigger that ended the lives of these two young girls. That's who I want. Chris Bissy, he's the guy who pulled the trigger. I felt strongly that we had enough to charge, and so we made the decision to charge Bissy in early December.
It was in the middle of the night, around 4 o'clock in the morning, and it was the head detective, and he said, Joan, I just want to tell you we made an arrest. I was like stunned, and all I remember saying, oh my God, who was it? I thought it was going to be somebody I knew. I was holding my breath like, and he said it was Chris Bissy. I said, I don't know who that is. I don't know where he came from. He didn't date Jennifer, he didn't date Mary, he didn't hang around with them. The detective said, I just want to tell you, it's out in the media. I'll guarantee you, in no time they're going to be there, and they're going to be all over your house, they're going to be coming in. So, we did. I got the kids, I got everybody up, and we got dressed. When I came out, they were everywhere. There were, people with cameras and reporters with the microphones in my face. And did you know the person? Asking me 100 questions. Baby in my arm, and I fell. I tripped and I fell. I was a mess. I was like, let me out of here. Let me get in my car. I just locked the doors and I left. Still, I didn't know what happened. Who was this Chris Bissy? Why would you shoot my daughter? My goal was to try to find out why he did it.
It's a picture of Chris Bissy after he was arrested. He looked like an average Joe. He looked young and innocent. But I guess he wasn't. I got to know what he looked like. I got to know what hate means. As far as I'm concerned, it's a picture of a killer. Nothing more, nothing less. A no good piece of
first time I ever saw Chris Missy was, I always said if you lined up 50 people, 50 suspects, he'd probably be the last one I would have picked. Because he looked bewildered, he was young, baby face. He didn't have that hardcore look that you would expect. Why do I know them? And then it clicked. Those were the two that were up at the lookout that day. It was actually the driver and the passenger is who it turned out to be. And that's creepy to think that I was standing there talking to them all that time it was them.
They were actually afraid of Bissy themselves. They didn't really want to testify, and we had to really, work on them and tell them how important it was. And one day there'll be citizens who will be able to look back and say, I helped the police solve a murder. The witnesses described that he started shooting from the vehicle and then got out of his car, walked down, and shot again the girl when she was trying to flee. In case without these eyewitnesses, I needed them. When I have to convince a jury, all 12 beyond a reasonable doubt, I'd like to give them a reason to say, here's why he killed this person. But we don't have them all the time. In my closing argument to the jury, I said, I can't, Mr. and Mrs. Grider, live with this daily and the pain of it. And there's still unanswered questions for them. They want a reason. Yeah, they want to know why. Then it's up to the jury, 12 people. We don't know what they're going to do, and they all have to agree. It's not an easy burden, beyond a reasonable doubt, and all 12 people have to come to the same verdict. It was one of the hardest cases I've tried.
The day of the verdict, I remember them saying, Christopher Bissy, we find you guilty of first-degree murder. And I remember sitting there, thinking my kid to the side, where are you? Why aren't you back here with us? This is all done. This joke is over with. Why aren't you here with us? And it didn't change anything. At the time, I wanted the death penalty. He needs to fry. Let him die. But now, years later, I'm a mother, and I have 5 daughters, and people make mistakes, so I'm very torn. Now I'm very torn. Who am I? I'm no better to have him killed. I'm no better. We'll let God deal with it. He destroyed my parents. Because I do everything to make my parents' life perfect, and I can't make it perfect because I can't bring her back. I wish he would tell us why, so my parents could have some kind of closure.
I went to see Chris Missy. A lot of people did not think I should go. I did not go there to forgive him. I did not go there to excuse him that I would pick up on. I walked in first and I sat there, then they brought him down. And I started crying. I don't know why, I think I was so nervous. I started crying and I just said, you have no idea what you've done to my life. I said, especially my husband. I sat there for 7 hours with Chris Missy. He never once said he was sorry, feeling bad for me, or he just didn't care. Everything was denial. He didn't know the girls. He had no idea what happened. He just lied. He just told so many lies. He said, well, first I want to tell you something. I never knew any girls from Bethlehem. He said, I don't know anybody from Bethlehem. Lie. And then he got up and left the room, and I left the room, and that was the end of it. For 26 years, I've lived without knowing why. Unfortunately, I have lung cancer, and I'm facing a life-threatening operation. When all this happened, these were young kids. I think there was a lot of teenagers that might have known what happened or what it was about. They talk about it now. But doing this interview, maybe we'll get an answer out of it. Maybe somebody would say, after all these years, my conscience bothers me. I do want to tell you, or I do remember something. And if things would work out for me, then I'll have some answers.
He's still alive. They talk about how they have such bad prison, the cells are bad and stuff. I don't care. I mean, they did a crime. They got to do the time. And like I say, their cells might be 8 by 10s, but my coffin, my daughter's in, is only 6 by 3, So there's no room for her. But he's still kicking, so. Usually Saturday mornings. Well, it's his Holy Savior Cemetery. It's in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Especially because my daughter's here. It's just someone I can talk to without being ridiculed, like someone, oh, you can't say that, or you shouldn't, she just listens. It's good. But still alive. It's kind of hard because I think about that all the time. What would you be doing now, or how many kids would you have? How many grandkids would I have? Stuff like that. I think about it all the time. It's always okay to cry around her. And I do sometimes. Sometimes I smile, sometimes I cry.
I see yellow tape, police cars, police everywhere. Judy had been beaten. We had no idea who would do this. Who would hurt Judy? Why would someone beat Judy? My concern was, where's the children? I prayed a lot. Praying for the kids. Praying that Judy would survive. It's going to live.
So at this point now, they see we have a body down. It's a female and she's moaning, she's in pain. It had appeared her attacker bashed her head against those rail ties. Judy's been beaten, left for dead. She was ill. The concern was that she was not going to survive. And whoever had done this was still out there. But you gotta do what you gotta do. All hands on deck. Let's find out who did this.
It's the start of when Judy was looking for a new life. A new beginning right here in Omaha. Just think that I wish they had stayed in Minneapolis, because maybe things would have turned out differently. My cousin and Judy were high school sweethearts, and she's just part of the family. I love Judy, and I always considered her my cousin. When my cousin and Judy broke up, something better for her and her kids. I told her she could live with me until she got herself together, found Judy was excited to be here in Omaha for her and Draymar and Latara. She got a job. She's going out, meeting people. She's happy. You can see that she's happy. I was happy for all three. One of the things that bothers me the most, that plays over, I wanted something different, something better. And I thought that she was going to find that. And that did not turn out to be the case. Eventually, she left my house and moved to her apartment. I feel like maybe if she had been at my house,
So what we're walking down into is an industrial area, rail yard. It was pretty chilly that morning, probably about 30. So the officers respond to the area. They notice some blood, and then they hear moaning. So at this point now, they see we have a body down, and it's a female, and she's moaning, she's in pain. Adamant that she had not fallen and that she was beaten. It had appeared her attacker had simply bashed her head against those rail ties. The massive amount of damage that was done to the back of her head, her skull, and her flesh, which was torn open from these ties. The back of the wound on the back of her head, the blood was dripping this way with it pooling around the top of the tie here. So the aggressor actually, in this manner, with the head smashing against the tie. You could tell the blood had been dripping down the back of the tie and coagulating down at the bottom. So she had been there for she had made her way from where the rail ties are here over to the brush area. From what we could tell, the body was dragged in this direction here. The blood trail followed as well. Well, ultimately, she ended up over here in this area, which is where she was found. I had asked her if she knew who had beat her. She nodded her head in the affirmative that she did, but she could not come up with a name. She was transported by medics up to the hospital. She's placed in a coma. So any conversation after that ceased. The concern was that she was not going to survive the investigation. When I arrived to the scene, it had been already quadrant off. I'm looking around to see if there's anything else that I need to pay attention to. And we noticed some footprints over in the brush where she was found. A cigarette butt. We found one within a few feet of where the body was. That was collected in the hopes of collecting DNA for whoever was here at the time to be able to use later once we located a suspect. I advised her that Judy had been severely beaten and was in the hospital. I was asked, well, what about the children? And my heart stopped. I was like, children, what do you mean? And she's like, no, she has 2 kids. Do you know where they are? And I said, I know the names, and gave us an address. So time is of the essence at this point. Judy's been beaten, left for dead. the hunt was on to find the kids.
I started getting all these phone calls from Minneapolis. Stop calling me. And it's my cousin. He said that Judy had been beaten and they didn't know where the kids were. I was thinking, who would hurt Judy? And all I could hear on the call was the kid's grandmother saying, "Go." I see yellow tape, police everywhere. There's a police officer, and I stop. I'm looking for my cousins. Their mom was beaten really bad. Are they here? Go to the police department. They need to ask you some questions. And I'm like, for what? What kind of questions? Concerning what? It's like, did Judy die? Tell me, did Judy die? Where are my cousins? It put me in high anxiety. This can't be happening. Tell me where the kids are. They have to be terrified.
Judy's apartment was just right around the corner from the railroad tracks. We went to the apartment, didn't get an answer at the door. I believe it was in my mind and my partner's mind that the kids were not there. The landlord was able to, there were no signs of forced entry. The residence itself did not appear to be ransacked. There was a phone that was on the floor. The receiver was off the hook. As we entered into the apartment, it was dark. We hit the light switch on and see directly into a bedroom. It's there that we saw the body of a young female laying on the bed in a manner that was just not a natural position. You're kind of stunned. You can't believe what you're seeing. So we began. And in the bathroom, we ran across a juvenile young black male in the bathtub who was in an unnatural position and was also deceased. This is how he was found by us. For whatever reason, in my mind's eye, this is exactly how I'm first seeing him. There wasn't any question in our mind who they were. We were fairly certain it was Latara and Trimar. I was sickened at what I saw and how somebody could do that to the kids. It's a lot to grasp and a lot to deal with. So yeah, not an easy scene to walk through. It's been 20 years, right? It's still. So you soak it all in. You know, you got to do what you got to do. And game on, all hands on deck. Let's find out who did this. The bodies were photographed and removed. I believe both bodies were removed probably about 6 to 8 hours. Examiners for an autopsy to take place with us the next day or the following day. We remained at that scene for several days just to ensure that we didn't miss anything. During that time frame, Judy was still in a coma, so there was no attempts at re-interviewing her to get anything additional from her about what happened, nor what had happened to her kids. In Judy's apartment, we located several items of evidence that we wanted to make sure and send to the lab. Those items included the used condom in the bathroom, and there was a soiled towel at the feet of where Latara was laying. So hopefully we would be able to get the DNA off of that. And that's kind of where we were at with it. Whoever had done this was still out there.
I go to the police department, and I go into this room, and they ask me these questions about Judy. Why are you asking me all these questions? My concern was, where's the children? Where's Latara? Where's Tremar? They said they couldn't tell me. I thought that if I answered their questions, that I would be taking the kids with me. That there would not be a need for... It's like almost 10 o'clock. They take me back to my house. And that's when I went and looked at the TV. It's bodies out. And body bags. That I just left hours ago. And you had me down there answering questions, and you didn't tell me that my cousins were dead. Knowing that the kids were murdered was overwhelming, scary, because we had no idea who would do this. I prayed a lot, praying that I don't think that they gave her a good chance of surviving. I don't think that they thought Judy was going to live.
When I first woke up, trying to figure out where am I and why am I here, what happened. I remember seeing the nurse, then all of a sudden I remember the nurse running out and a bunch of nurses and a doctor come running in my room, and I'm just looking around and I'm remembering a lot of it's like, where are my kids? Why haven't they called me? Do they know where I'm at? It's like I need my kids. And I kept asking my mom, have you talked to Latara and Tremar? Well, she said fine. Because the doctors, they said, don't tell me about the kids yet because I could go into shock. I could go back into a coma. She said, Judy, there's something I gotta tell you. I'm like, okay, what? She said it's about Latara and Tremar. I said, what about them? She said, Judy, they're gone. I'm like, what do you mean they're gone? She said, Judy, they're dead. I said, you're lying. Why are you lying on? She said, they are gone. They died. I'm like, what? You're lying. Why is everybody lying? She said, they were murdered. And then the doctor came in. She said, I'm just going to give you this shot. It's going to calm you down, let you sleep for a while.
Tremar. Good-looking kid. Fun grin on his face. Yeah, I can't imagine what they were thinking, what was going through their mind when all that was happening. This case in particular was disturbing to me in the manner that they suffered before they were killed. And to know that a human being is undergoing that, that's probably the most bothersome thing about it. I wasn't going to let those two die in vain and have Judy not be able to know who did. Judy was the only witness to what occurred as far as we knew. Judy was interviewed at the hospital to see if she could recall anything, which didn't really reveal much of anything. So we needed to do our due diligence, get out. We are wanting to talk to anybody and everybody who knows anything about Judy that could provide us with any leads of who she knows, who she hangs out with. And the name Lee kept coming up. Lee was somebody new to Judy who she was dating. Family had not met Lee before. We did not know anything other than Lee. Lee, first name, Lee. Even when she got out of her coma, she was not able to even put together who Lee was. The DNA that was collected from both crime scenes were submitted to the lab in the bedroom, the condom at the apartment, and the cigarette butt at the railroad tracks. When the DNA results did come back, that indicates the same person was at both crime scenes. It simply came back as an unidentified male. So at that point, no. We were not able to connect to a particular person. Judy had several boyfriends, and we were trying to interview them and get some DNA samples from them as well. One gentleman whose name was Lee initially was cooperative. So, of course, that piqued our interest. Why not? You were cooperative all of a sudden up until now when you know we want DNA. So our focus was tight on him. He agreed to do a polygraph. The results were somewhat indicative of not being completely truthful. Take that sample from him, that is submitted, and ultimately the tests come back to reveal that he was not involved. But we were still trying to determine who the Lee was. We are at a little bit of a standstill. We needed more information from severe head trauma. So is she ever going to remember what occurred to her?
I really wanted my memory. I wanted to know who took my kids. I wanted to get justice for my kids. But I had to get my memory back. It took months for me to start remembering things. I could be asleep, wake up, and I got a memory, or I could just be sitting talking to somebody, and all of a sudden a memory would pop up. It's weird, but scary. A lot of times it's like, okay, did this really happen on me? got out the hospital, I felt real alone. I felt like nobody don't understand. It's like they're looking at me like, you killed your kids and you can't remember. I didn't kill them, but I know who killed them. And I just thinking, Judy, you're dumb. You're dumb. Come on now, you can do this. I was real angry at myself. Real angry. Then one day, I was sitting outside on the porch. A detective had came and left his card and said to let them know when I got. And then, I don't know, it was like a light bulb in my head. And I'm like, I remember his name. His name was Lee. I was outside of Rochelle's house, and he pulls up and saying hi, and I look good to him. It was flattering. And I asked who he was, and he told me his name. I just knew him as Lee. Now I wish I never did speak to him, but I did. Lee came over to the apartment and asked if I could go out riding with him. Latar and Tremar knew who I left with. I'm finna leave with Lee. I'll be back. They said, okay. So I left with Lee. We were sitting on that hill. So Lee said, I'm gonna go get me a beer. You want another beer? And I said, yeah. And he walked back to the car and he opened the trunk of the car. I seen Lee get a beer out, so then I turned back around. And that's as far as my memory goes. That's it. That's all I remember. After I remember who Lee was, I started crying then. I said, thank you, Lord. Thank you, Latar and Tremar. Now we gotta call the detectives, because you got some of your memory back and this is gonna help.
That we shared has so many memories. I just had one rule, and that was no men in and out of my house. And she agreed. One night, I came downstairs, and Judy's door was closed. Sweat playing. So I knock on the door, and Judy comes to the door in a little red negligee, and I'm just like, do you have someone in there? And she says, yes. I'm like, I told you, like, whoever it is, I gotta go. And this guy comes out, and he never looks at me. It was strange to me that this man never even looked at me. He seemed kind of weird, kind of creepy. It's like, I've been out here dating a little bit. Take it from me. She's like, oh, it'll be okay. I think she was naive.
And then I just remember I kept saying that I don't understand why. Why do you try to kill me? Why did he kill my kids? And then, I don't know, I can't explain it. Just, again, a light popped up in my head that I helped him. And it was like, oh my God. Lee had said, well, Judy, I got a proposition for you. Me and my cousin, we know how we can get some money. And I said, well, he said he knew about this place in Omaha that sells old cars. Lee told me all I would have to do is go into the car place and act like I'm interested in buying a car. All I would have to do is distract the guy. So I was like, okay, yeah, I can, no guns involved. I'm scared of guns. And Lee promised me, oh no, it ain't gonna be no guns. Nothing like that. We just need you to distract him. Okay, alright, I'm willing to do that. Gullible me, goofy me, dumb me. Of the robbery, but I remember being there. Lee came in and I'm startled, scared, because they had guns. So, oh my God, I'm thinking in my head, I'm finna get killed now. He lied to me. And I ran. I was running for my life. I was thinking it was the police saying, oh my God, I'm caught. I knew it. I should have known better. But it was Lee and his cousin. I followed them to the car. I got in the car and said, take me home now. Take me home now. And he's like, we got money. The guy told me, I want to go home. What did I just do? I know better than this. You actually helped somebody rob someone. And that wasn't right. I was scared. I was scared. It was like, oh Lord, please forgive me. I was praying and kept saying, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was thinking he was trying to kill me because I knew about the robbery and that I was going to talk. And my kids could tell him who I left with. And I believe that's why he killed my kids. So my kids couldn't talk. I started blaming myself again. That it was my fault. Put part blame on my children's death because of that robbery. That's what I really believed. When I started remembering details of the robbery, it was scary. Tell the police I'm gonna be in trouble. But they thanked me for telling them.
That was enough detail for us to then go research other incidents that occurred during that time frame to match up We found an incident that involved the same type of detail, pretty much down to the T. In looking at that incident, we discovered that a suspect had been arrested. He had bonded out of jail. We interviewed him, and he did in fact admit to the robbery and provided the suspect. The person that he named was Arthur Lee Gales. So that now defined for us who Lee was. He explained his physical stature, gold tooth, bald head, the type of vehicle he drove, the location of where Mr. Gales lived, everything that we were looking for. And the next morning, we served the warrant. He's nervous, takes out a cigarette. I recall my partner and I kind of looking at each other. It was just like an instant little static of electricity between the two of us. It's the same brand of cigarette that we knew this was him. It's Arthur Lee Gales. It's pretty much the same expression he had on his face when I was staring at him, when he was smoking a cigarette. Just dead eyes. Not much of anybody, just kind of a shell of a person. The size 12 shoe and brand shoe print that we found at the scene was the same shoe that we found. We have a warrant to get DNA from him. We take that sample from him, that is submitted, and ultimately the tests come back to reveal that the DNA is a match. We finally did it. This is our guy.
When I found out that this Arthur Lee Gales, totally confused. And then it dawns on me that this Lee guy is the guy that was in my house. That's terrifying to think about, having someone in your house that's capable of doing the things that he did. This guy could have killed all of us. I love this picture of Tremor. This is a painful reminder of Latara and Tremor. They're just babies. They were just babies. They just, peacefully die. But his smile, his smile is just, it was just so full of happiness and joy. And a loving person. Oh, take it away.
There were several theories between Gales and Judy. Did they have a fight? Maybe there was some discussion about the robbery itself, her involvement. Maybe she was unhappy to the extent of what Gales involved her in. There are a variety of different hypotheses that were discussed. Nothing really was ever settled on as far as what ultimately. Judy was not charged in the robbery. It was decided due to the amount of trauma that she was already undergoing and the homicide of her two children, that would just be left alone. Nobody wants to see bad things happen to children. And when you witness it, and now you're in start to finish. So, yeah, you take a lot of it home with you.
Didn't want me to attend the trial. They said I could have a seizure. My doctors The only day of the trial that I could attend was when they gave the verdict. When he came in, I looked at him, looks could kill, he'd be dead, but he came in and he looked dead at me and couldn't take his eyes off me. I suppose he was surprised to see me sitting there. Guilty for me, and guilty for Latara, and guilty for Trayvon. I said, now justice has been served.
I want him to die. He took my life. He took my children.
I wanted to see Arthur Lee Gale suffer. I really did. I was cheated. They say I'm disabled. I still won't accept it. I don't want nobody to feel sorry for me. But there's still a lot of times it's like, why? Why couldn't you take me? Leave my children but take me? Why? And I do feel that I have to pay for the rest of my life. I wish I could forget what he looked like. I really do. But there's a part of me that's scared to forget what he looks like, because I think if I do, I'm going to forget what my kids look like. And I can't do that. I'll never forgive myself. All I have is their memory and their pictures.
The town called it the Weather Vane House because from the green at the center, you could see the roofline's crooked shadow, and if you squinted at the right hour, the iron veins still pointed with an unnerving insistence toward the moor. The house sat on a rise where the road forked and then loped off into fields that swallowed the horizon. Long ago, people had painted it white. Time had stripped that paint into weathered bands, and the clapboards now looked like ribs beneath the skin of the sky. No one moved into the Weather Vane house willingly. Widowers came for a year and then left. Painters stayed through to summers and then packed it once in autumn. Rumor said the house liked tenancy for a while and then asked for things the living could not give. It had the patience of wood and a small cruelty that is patient enough to outlast bargains. May Holloway arrived in October, driving a van the color of spilled ash, with a few boxes, a kettle that had seen better days, and a neck full of small, sensible grief. She'd been a teacher in the city. Her marriage had ended with paperwork that smelled faintly of citrus, and the shallow politeness of lawyers. She bought the house because it was cheap and because she liked the idea of a place that needed care. She told herself she liked the house's shape in the photographs, its low porch, the paneled door that seemed to breathe when she pushed it open. She told herself she would restore it. She told herself 100 things that hid the ache in the middle of her chest. On the second night she heard the tapping. It began as the sort of sound houses make settling, the pipes, an animal in the eaves. May walked through the parlor with a cup of tea, the mug leaving a halo on the armchair where the cloth had faded into bare fabric. The tapping came from the pantry, 1, then 3, then 2. It had a measure to it as if someone had a metronome for an old hurt. She opened the pantry door. Nothing moved but the jars, an old jar of pennies, a jar of nails, a jar with a lock of someone's hair swirled like a question. The tapping stopped. She laughed at herself, the sound dry as toast, and chalked it up to nerves. Old houses make sounds, people leave things, the mind makes meaning. But the house does not always stop with small calls. It learns the sounds you like and the rhythms of your breath. It learns what to offer in exchange. The first exchange was a small thing, a photograph. May found it beneath the drawer of the kitchen table, curled like a leaf. The image showed a train platform in the rain and a people when a young woman, with her hair pinned back, The other a man with mud on his boots frozen in a smile that the photograph had caught mid-burst. On the back someone had written, in a hand that looped and then seemed to falter, "Give and keep." She set the photograph on the mantel because it felt like an offering, like a pebble tossed into a pool. The house responded with what any ledger would call a credit. The kettle boiled without a flame the next morning, settling into a convenience that felt like grace. May told herself it was a coincidence. She wrapped the photograph in her scarf and kept it in her pocket for a day. And for a day the wind that sometimes bit at her neck did not find purchase. The second exchange asked for a name. Names always start small. They begin as a pet name, a maiden name in a letter, a nickname bordered with affection. May found one etched into the underside of a stair tread. Mary 1947. Another night she woke with the sense of someone at the foot of the bed, watching the rise and fall of her chest. There were impressions in the dust by the window, 3 ovals like the ghost of a handprint, and when she placed her palm there her fingers seemed to find someone else's warmth. The house was learning how to speak. It learned what she feared. An elderly neighbor, Mrs. Dyer, stopped by with a casserole and a wariness that the town had shaped around its own mouth. She'd grown up in the valley, and she named the house differently. "Not hunger," she said, handing May the casserole with both hands. "It keeps things." For a price, she tapped the wooden lid with a spoon, as if to make a point. "Once my brother left a photograph there after some trouble. I came home calmer for a while. Later he could not remember a face. Sometimes what it gives by taking somewhere else." May's fingers clenched around the casserole dish. The conversation made her think of her own history, and she named it in her head the way you name a bruise when you finally look. Divorce. An apartment with a faucet that dripped. The end of a quotidian softness that had kept 2 people in the same bed for 10 years. She had been giving things, because that is how the living try to find closure. Small rituals. Folded letters, one last visit to a place that once mattered. Over the next weeks the house's ledger grew. May cataloged little things in a book she kept in the desk drawer. Date, object, note. Found, photograph, train platform. Action, kept. Effect, kettle boiled without flame. One day, she wrote like a scientist, because that is a way to feel less small. Her handwriting was neat. It made the list look like an experiment. Neighbors slid objects into her hands as if she had been deputized. A man named Pete from the feed store brought a cigar band and a low apology. Mrs. Alvarez left a recipe card with a shorthand scrawl for meatballs and a notation, "If tiny trouble." Keep. People came in twilight, voices down, leaving folded things they would not name aloud. May took them. She cataloged them. The house altered the world in exchange. Sometimes the change was small. A child no longer cried every night. Sometimes it was more ambiguous. A rumor stalled. A business stayed open. A life found a hairline of light in the dark. But economies calcify. The house learned that names were weightier than trinkets. Tokens and coins and photographs could be measured and stacked. But a name holds a life like a thread. To keep a name is to make absence. Someone forgets, or the syllable gets blunt at the edges, or a child stops calling someone by the single word that held their history. May refused at first. When a neighbor asked her to keep a letter, "Just keep it until I can breathe." The neighbor said May placed it in the drawer and wrote, "Pending." She wanted to return the list of favors with interest, not with loss. But the house communicates in other ways, in little creeps of cold, in dreams that fold you open and read you like a page. A week after she wrote "pending," the neighbor called, voice small and uncertain, and could not remember the name of the woman she had loved. She said, helpless at the end of the phone, "I know I loved somebody. The shape of it is still here. But her name, her actual name, won't come." Am I getting old? May could feel the ledger tightening like a band around the town's throat. She started leaving notes in the cupboard as if to bargain. Return to Mrs. Alvarez, photograph 1204. In those days she dreamed of the house like a busy merchant. Pockets lined with names. Its counters a neat place where sorrow and survival were traded in the dim light of dawn. Then, late one night, someone took a name that belonged to May. It started as a misplacement. She woke to make tea and found a single Polaroid on the pillow beside Heron. She had not left there of a woman on a platform, hair pinned back as the rain arched like enamel. On the back, in the same looping hand, give and keep, her breath caught like a match finding air. She put the photograph in her pocket and went about the day in a tremor, the kettle singing with a sound that had no match. Later that week she could not remember the name of her own mother. It was not the long dissolve of aging. It was a sudden blank, as if someone had taken a stamp and rubbed away the letters. May stood in the market and tried to call her mother to tell her about the sky, and the number came out wrong, a shape she could not find. She walked home and sat on the kitchen step and watched the light settle on the floorboards. Like a curtain, she had the sensation of missing something in the middle of her chest that used to be labeled, and now was not. Panic is not loud in a place like that. It is small, sharp, like glass in the hand. May flipped through the ledger in the drawer and found a new entry written in a hand she did not recognize. Taken presents 1. Request, keep what must be kept. The letters were neat and final. She started to bargain in a way she had not intended. If you give a town away to consign its suffering, people will use it. And if you are the keeper, you become the accountant of consolation. May tried to ration the house's appetite. She began to return objects when she could. Photographs slipped back into envelopes, to be mailed with trembling hands. Recipe cards reunited with torn edges taped. She stood on porches and made people say names aloud. An old superstition that felt like a remedy. Say it again. Say her name. Voices on porches gather like rain. Shouts have a way of rehanging a thing in the air. For a time it worked. Names that had flickered gone returned with the weight of gratitude. The house quieted as if it had been placated, its vein turning more leisurely against the sky. May told herself she had found a system. Keep only what the town could not bear to speak, and insist the rest be voiced. She taped extra labels onto photo frames. She wrote names on the backs of recipe cards in heavy ink. She taught the school children a song, every verse finished with an aunt or uncle's name. And the town was, just for an hour, a chorus. But the ledger has logic that is not kind. It learns optimization. Having gotten the taste of presents, it wanted an anchor. One evening, when the moon was thin and the wind had the particular smell of broken things, May discovered in the pantry a bundle tied with string. Inside was a tiny shoe, the sort made for infants, worn at the toe. Tucked beside it was a note, for balance keep. Her throat closed. She thought of all the small things she had accepted on behalf of others, and felt suddenly the paradox of stewardship, to lighten a neighbor's load. Sometimes asks you to wear their weight. She took the shoe to the mantel and felt the house press close as if to listen. She woke in the night to the sound of a lullaby. It was not any lullaby she knew. It was a stitch of several, a verse of an old church hymn and a fragment of a shopkeeper's hum. When she listened closely, she could hear multiple voices within it, neighbors. Strangersome threads of memory braided into a single song. She realized with a coldness that laced her fingers that the house was not content to be only an archive. It was creating, of memory, of presences by patchwork. It stitched the threads people brought to it and fashioned from them an approximation of what had once been. That night she dreamed of the train photograph. The woman with her hair pinned back was calling to someone across the tracks, but her voice came hollow and a little off, as if recorded and replayed. The dream unstitched her and gave her back the sense of missing like a physical thing. When she woke, there was a new entry in the ledger where she had left it. Balance achieved presence. Approximation. Beneath it, in a smaller hand, we remember when given. May understood then that the house did something else besides take and give. It healed by substitution. Where memory had been costly or dangerous for a family, it produced an echo, a practice, a figure to hold the space where loss had gaped. These approximations were not the real Presensino substitute could ever be, but they were enough to patch some things together so the living could keep breathing. The ethical cost was a thing you felt in the marrow. A child might sleep through the night because a neighbor's memory had been traded. A husband might stop asking about a missing wife because the house had filled the gaps others left. People repeated names aloud on porches less and leaned into a quiet that gradually became comfortable. The ledger's ink ran like a soft economy. It reallocated the town's sorrow so the communal life could continue. In some pragmatic sense, it was mercy, and yet mercy has a shadow. May found that once something has learned to moderate pain, it can be used. People began to offload not only pain but accountability. Old debts, small cruelties, petty betrayals found their way into the drawer beneath her desk. A craftsman came with a photograph and a silence about why. A woman delivered a letter and then returned the next day to speak about the man she had once struck, with an apology she might never have dared offer otherwise. The ledger became a place to consign guilt. May grew heavy with decisions: when to take, when to return, how to measure a life by the size of its erasures. The house, patient as wood and clever as wrought, adjusted its needs and asked for something bigger. One evening in late winter, a name she had not known well slipped from her lips in a moment of anger and grief. She thought of saying it aloud to anchor it, as she had taught others to do. The syllable balanced in the air and then emptied like a purse being turned. She felt a lurch, a small hollowness where a thing had been. Later she watched her hands and realized that in naming she had traded something private and real for the town's sake, and that the ledger's calculus had been completed without her full consent. She packed the photograph, the ledger, the infant shoe, and her kettle in a cloth and drove with the headlights on into the moor. The vane of the house pointed and pointed as if to say, "You cannot outrun balances." She forced herself to walk to the river where the path parted, and for a long time she stood at the edge and watched the water move like a line of ink. She realized that some houses are less places than systems, protocols, accountability, economies of forgetting. She had been the keeper of it for a season, learned the scale of its appetite, and paid with parts of herself. In spring she returned and sat on the porch and lifted the cloth. The photograph had been left on the mantel, but the image on its face had changed slightly, as if the rain had deepened the tones. The ledger lay open on the table, margins neat, an extra line added in a hand she recognized now as not wholly human. Keeper is kept. She understood then that the relationship works both ways. The house asks people to preserve the town by giving up certain things, and occasionally, it asks those who keep to be the sacrifice. May kept the ledger open for a while longer, cataloging every single exchange with the careful cruelty of someone who has survived the thing she tended. She taught the children to speak names with care and the elders to write their stories in multiple copies. She insisted that no one would offload away responsibility, and that the town would learn to carry grief collectively, so the house would not need to balance itself with the lives of the living. It was not a cure, it was a practice. Houses do not change their nature overnight, and communities are made of habits that choose comfort over confrontation. But over years the town learned to name aloud, to tape photographs and albums, and to make duplicates, to meet wrongs with conversation instead of consignments. The vane on the roof kept turning because the wind turned, but its insistence was less menacing. It had become a clock no one wanted to consult unless it was absolutely necessary. Years later, May left the weather vane house because people who keep ledgers sometimes must walk away or become the ledger. She left with one photograph wrapped in oilcloth, the woman on the platform, and her mud-spattered companion, the image of a moment that had been offered and kept and returned with a different value, and with a small piece of paper folded into the corner where someone had written only this: "Keep what you must, give what you can." She placed that photograph on her mantel in a small town across the moor, and whispered the woman's name aloud every autumn when the geese turned. The house on the rise remained, its vane turning, and sometimes a child would dare another to touch its porch, and sometimes an old woman would leave a recipe card with a note: "If trouble, keep." The town learned that memory cannot be managed without costs, and that kindness without accountability corrodes. They learned to say names often, to write them in duplicate, and to gather for funerals with voices that met the ledger's appetite with refusal and community. On nights when the wind was high and the sky black as spilled ink, the vane would point toward the moor, and the house would murmur like a ledger closing in the dark. But somewhere beneath its boards and behind its mantel, there would always be a book with ink that refused to be neat, and sometimes a weary neighbor. Sometimes a temporary tenant would be the one who, for a spell, balanced accounts between living absence and communal survival. And in the dim light May sometimes heard, not a knock but a question: what do we owe one another? The answer was never simple. It was messy and human and sometimes sharp as a coin. But they kept asking it, aloud and in gatherings, and for as long as they kept asking, the house's appetite found itself tempered, not erased. No, tempered. That is a small mercy in the ledger of living.